It's been quite a week on the premier current affairs show on radio, Deep Dive on Capital 100.4 FM with Rumbi Zaivenge.
But the one thing that we cannot stop doing is conceptualizing, is thinking, is growing, and even sitting down and doing nothing is something. Somebody said that to me once.
The Deep Dive with Rumbi Zaivenge, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m. The premier current affairs show on radio.
Hi, this is Ringo Madingos. You are listening to Rumbi Benge on radio. Don't change the dial.
I'm Rosella Miller. You're listening to Rumbi Venge on Capitalk 100.4 FM, Harare's heartbeat.
We start things off as we get into a very crucial conversation about our identity. We're talking about Africa Day and beyond. Reparations, Africa, the time is now. Sounds there of Burning Spear, and I'm so excited to welcome my guest in the studio. None other than Ambassador Kwame Mzawazi. He is the CEO of the Museum of African Liberation and the Institute of African Knowledge. It is a African evening to you, Ambassador. Good evening, Magadi.
Magadi, always a pleasure to be your guest. I'm just not happy that you invite me here once a year, only when it's Africa Day. You don't invite me when it's Christmas Day. When you are having a huku ne rice, you don't invite me for Christmas. You don't invite me for anything except Africa Day. I mean, I'm okay with that, but that's not good.
And Ambassador, I'm working on that.
Yeah.
But it's always a pleasure, to see you here and to talk about African issues.
Yeah, I mean, of course, with the greatest and utmost pleasure and satisfaction.
Wonderful indeed. There you have it. Ambassador Kwame Nkrumah is
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kwame Mzawazi. Yes, but you see already.
Please, don't put me in a league I don't belong to. Hey. Kwame Nkrumah, hey.
It's a good slip of the tongue. It's a good
Rumbi,
slip
please.
I'm buttering you up. But welcome to our listeners and, of course, to our special guest, a very special segment as we are commemorating Africa Day. And the theme was really significant, and I was really excited to see the theme. Justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations.
Yes.
So we want to explore that, Ambassador. What does this mean? And we're really excited you're here to share your insights with us.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this theme? And how do you think reparations can address a legacy of slavery, of colonialism, of hurt, of crimes against humanity, against black people?
Yeah. Well, the concept of reparation is a concept of justice. The world over, whatever civilization, whether it is the African civilization, whether it is the European or Chinese or Indian civilization, the concept of reparation or reparations is the concept of justice. What does it mean? It means when you've done wrong, you must pay. Here in Zimbabwe, kuna na sabuku kumamisha huko. Kana wakanganisa unoripa ne mombe. Yeah. Saka, the people of Africa, as far as the year 2025 is concerned, as a collective body, within the framework of the African Union, are saying America and Europe vane mombe dzedu zavasina kuunza nenyaya ye inonzi the transatlantic slave trade that happened over a very long period, stretching 200-300 years, where the black person was a commodity. You see? And when I look at you, Rumbi, you're so strong and fit. You would be one of the most expensive slaves. You see? So, the theme for this year, the African theme for this year, Justice for Africa and the People of Africa, is coming at the right time when the world is grappling with the whole issue of what should be done to repair the wrongs, what should be done to ensure that whatever injustices that were inflicted are corrected. And let me tell you, they're not going to give us. We've got to take it. They are not going to give us. We've got to take it. You see, so there are a few issues here. Number one, you don't get justice delivered to you. You demand justice. You don't get rights given to you. You take them. You fight for them and you win them. You see, so what is Africa doing to get these things repaired? That is what reparations about. But let me go a little bit further. It's not just about reparations. Reparations is what the white man of Europe and America has got to do today to repair the damage. Okay, that is what reparations is all about. But there's a second issue, which is in connection with the song by Burning Spear, the prophet whom you've just played. He was singing about, they stole my identity, and how you get back your identity. On this issue, second to the issue of reparations, is the issue of repatriation. Repatriation. And fellow Africans, fellow Zimbabweans, repatriation is not physical, it's educational. Okay. So repatriation means you and I, as the son and daughter of Africa, coming back home to Africa. We are saying the majority of our people are deputy Europeans by choice. They must be repatriated. And repatriation is not physical, it's educational. So, reparations is what the white man must do for the African to pay for the price of the wrongs they did. Repatriation is what the African must do for himself or herself to come back home.
And you say it doesn't have to be physical.
Yes, it's not physical. It's educational. You see. So, I mean, we'll go one by one, you see. And we'll start with the issue of the reparations, Rumbi. There's been a call for Europe and America to pay for the transatlantic slave trade.
How much are they supposed to pay? I mean, it's always a big question. How long is a piece of string?
There is no price to this because what happened to Africa is priceless. It cannot be priced. Africa was the leading civilization in the world until the conquest of Africa through colonization and imperialism. We're leading the world in every field of science and humanity. Okay? Until Europe realized that they needed spices to preserve their foods. And then they colonized Africa and India. They came to Africa for spices. They came to Africa for minerals to build their homes. You see, you need to understand that Europe and America was built on the back of African blood, African sweat, and African efforts. They built their countries from nothing, from scratch, because labor was free of charge. Now that it's built and up and running, it's time to pay. It's time to pay. So can we talk about it? No, you can't quantify this in terms of money. It's about the systems and policies that the world is going to agree that are going to be put in place to ensure that the 500 years that Africa lost, we lost 500 years. 500 years were lost. How can we recover? How can we recover? The transatlantic slave trade stole almost 25% of our population. And it was not just a number. It was the most able-bodied, the most able-minded Africans were lost to the slave trade. How are we going to recover from that? That's where the issue of reparations should come into play. You see. Now, how much? There is no price to this. But let's talk about the policies and procedures that must be put in place. Okay, for example, right now, we've got an organization called the United Nations. The United Nations succeeded the League of Nations. The League of Nations existed after World War I, and then it failed. Then came the World War II, which gave birth to the UN. Now, the UN, the structure of the UN has got the elite body called the Security Council. And the Security Council followed by the General Assembly. Now, forget about the General Assembly because everybody is part of the General. Any country is part of the General Assembly. If you and me form a country right now, we can apply to be the General in the General Assembly.
And be admitted.
But nyaya ili pamamonya anon the Security Council. 5 countries. 5 countries are in the Security Council. And this is, the USA, France, the UK, China, and Russia. Right. Africa is not on that table where decisions of a security matter, world security matter, are made. Right. If we are cognizant of the injustices that have been caused on the black people, we've got to understand that Africa right now is 30% of the global population. How can 30% of the global population not be represented at the highest table in the world? You see? Reparations means correcting these injustices and saying, okay, the black voice has to be heard. The black voice has to be heard. And the black voice must fight for a place on the table. And if we don't get a place on the table, if need be, within the framework of the spirit of Pan-Africanism of the 50s and 60s, if we don't get a place on the table, let's build another table.
Yes, with our own wood. But I want to come in there, Ambassador Kwame. There are issues, even of ideology. As we're talking about reparations, there's one side and one school of thought that is seeing dollar bills, euro bills, and saying, Tichapi wamari.
Yeah.
And then another side, the one that you're bringing out, that is about policy. It's about having a seat at the table and being able to take part in our future and make decisions and, maybe even, institutionalize a African agenda.
Yeah, no, we don't want the cash. Rumbi, anybody who is a rich man and gives you cash hates you.
Okay.
Right. Get this very clearly. If anybody has got money and you go to them and they give you cash, they don't like you.
Okay.
Because
empowerment.
cash is the fish. You don't want the fish. You want the rod. Okay? Even if you give me 1,000 fish, it's going to rot in the next 3 days. You understand? We don't want the cash. We want access. A rich man who likes you isn't going to give you cash. They're going to give you access to their network. They're going to give you access to their business. They're going to give you access to what's going to make you not, rich with some bit of cash, but that's going to make you wealthy, wise, and influential and powerful. Cash doesn't do that alone. You see, so we don't want cash because cash, inotsa nemoto.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Because that's a big issue, Ambassador. The form that reparations should take. And then once that has been established, how can reparations be implemented effectively?
Yeah, the reparations must be implemented as a matter of the processes and procedures that are going to be unlocked, you see. And I talked about policies and procedures, which are decisions, political decisions of the American and European elite. Let's talk about giving back to Africa what they stole. Okay? Right now, if you go to Europe, it is full of the artifacts, the treasure that was stolen and looted from Africa. If you go to the African Museum in Brussels, you will find the Lebombo bones. What are the Lebombo bones? The Lebombo bones are the world's oldest evidence of the science of mathematics. Mathematics somo yakatanga mu Africa, and the oldest existing evidence was found between Eswatini and South Africa in that mountain range called the Lebombo Mountain Range. Those bones are in Brussels right now in the African Museum. They are making 150 million euros every year from the global tourism traffic visiting Brussels to see the oldest evidence of the science of mathematics that comes from Africa. What it means is that the people of Eswatini in South Africa are losing 150 million in tourism revenue right now.
But it does bring us back to a number, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it does bring us back to a number, but now this is about restoring our legacy, heritage, culture, and artifacts that are tangible. That we're saying bring it back. We don't want so-called philanthropic aid of these Europeans. We don't want that. And we have got a proposal. Instead of you giving us foreign aid, give us back our artifacts. And the people who are visiting Europe will visit Africa, and we can make the money ourselves.
And how has that been received?
It will, you know, I must say that it's a campaign that's overdue.
I see.
Waiting for you and me.
I'm ready. I'm on it.
Yeah. Because right now what I'm expecting is the leadership of the African Union to say, hello. Any museum in Europe that is housing a stolen artifact from Africa must be closed. And sending a legion of Africans to occupy that museum, to close that door and say, for as long as you are making money from the artifacts of Africa, we are not going to make you, we're going to allow you to make any money. Right now, the British Museum, the British Library, 90% of what's in there are stolen artifacts. And some of these things, they've acknowledged them. Now, if they've acknowledged them, we are expecting the African leadership to take us home and, you know, take the next necessary step. Bring our artifacts back home. As Zimbabwe, we have sent delegation after delegation to the United Kingdom, asking for the remains of Mbuyane, right? And they come and they are dilly-dallying and prevaricating on our founding fathers and these sacred spirits. The skulls are there, and they're not yet here. It's part of repatriation. It's part of reparations. Because reparation is not monetary. I see cash. Reparation is the process. And giving back what doesn't belong to you is part of reparations, you see. So I'm saying it's a very positive step that the African Union say 2025 is the year of
justice for African people.
Yeah, but it's a good decision. But kungotanga, let's go further.
I hear you, Ambassador, and bringing it and localizing it, bringing it, back home into a Zimbabwean context. As the Museum of African Liberation, you play a significant role in preserving Africa's history and promoting liberation and the stories around how we got our hard-earned independence. How does your work relate to the reparations agenda, or what is Zimbabwe starting to do to also, toe the line and be loud and proud in the reparations argument?
It is quite encouraging that Africa is beginning to realize the visionary leadership of His Excellency, Comrade Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa, who has been championing the creation and institutionalization of a process of recognizing African history through the Museum of African Liberation. He has, and his government, found 100 hectares of prime land in Harare and said, in these 100 hectares, we are going to glorify and praise the history of Africa. Not just Zimbabwe, but Africa. Because, as I said, reparation and the reparation process, as well as repatriation, is not just physical, it is educational. And the museum is an educational agenda. You see, an agenda of rewriting the history of Africa. It's a corrective agenda of making sure the wrong narratives about Africa are corrected. You see, it's part of the process. It's part of the whole process, because the museum as an institution plays a role in making sure that our history is a living organism. Our history, our past is part of us. It's not some, forgettable period of the past. The past is part of the present, and the present is part of the past.
That is so true. And I'm also thinking, as you're saying that, it's also important to have one version of events. We've heard different narratives, different accounts, and I believe that the African, Museum of Liberation is conglomerating all those versions into one long-lasting version of where we are. I will be taking questions from our listeners in just a moment. As always, you always invite a lot of questions. But looking at, the African Union, for example, the African bloc, how can the African Union, how can African countries and the international community work together to advance the reparations agenda? Or is this a case where there can be no collaboration? Simply because, we are going after their hides, aren't we? We are saying we want you to rectify the crimes of the past using the same yardstick and barometer that you've created around human rights, around justice, around fairness. So how do we engage with them? Is there any engagement also juxtaposing the issues of diplomacy and the international community that Africa is a part of?
Yeah, well, we've got to do it both ways. We've got to do it through the diplomatic process, but we've also going to do it through the by any means necessary process. Yeah. Kana zvikutaurirana zvaramba. Let's do it by any means necessary. Yeah, as already demonstrated by the founding fathers of Africa, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Jomo Kenyatta, Robert Mugabe, William Du Bois, George Padmore, Nasser of Egypt, and others of blessed memory. We will engage the world, but if need be, we will go our own way by any means necessary. Remember what I said. We are fighting for a place on the table. But if you deny us a chair on the table, we'll create another table. You see. So it's up to the world, because right now, Africa is the most powerful continent in terms of riches, natural resources. Africa has got 60% of its population below the age of 30. We are the youngest continent. We are the future of the world.
That's power.
Yeah. We are 1.3 billion people, you see. So we can bargain. What's necessary is, however, an internal process as Africans to understand each other. And so as part of the repatriation process, let us understand our power, our bargaining power, and empower ourselves to talk to the world. You see, because you know, right now, when the world wants to talk to Europe, there's one person the world will call. One. When the world wants to talk to the USA, you call Marco Rubio if you want to talk to the USA. If you want to talk to 250 million Americans, there's one person you can talk to. But in Africa right now, if you want to talk to Africa, you call 55 foreign ministers.
Yeah, that hit.
You see, we've got to correct this. And this is an internal issue. We need a family meeting and discuss this issue. How do we have one voice speaking on behalf of our global view? How do we have one voice speaking over our minerals? How do we have one voice speaking over our cultural considerations? You see. And so when you fight the good fight of reparations and repatriations, you're very strong.
Are we ever going to find ourselves in that position that you're talking about? It sounds very idealistic that Africa to speak with one voice. There's a lot of self-interest. And they don't care about other people's interests. They don't care about furthering an entire people forward. And sometimes these are the people standing in the way of that common purpose. How do we come together in the way that you describe?
You see, Kwame Nkrumah, our revered founding father, wrote a book called Africa Must Unite. It is inevitable and inescapable that Africa will have to find a way to speak with one voice. Takatarisa kana musadak muno. Malawi as an entity on its own, what can it achieve on the global stage? Zambia, Zimbabwe as separate countries. But if we find a way to speak together, even only in terms of economic issues, our bargaining power is massive. You know, a few years ago, the president of Malawi wanted to see the CEO of Toyota in Japan. The CEO of Toyota says, he doesn't have the time.
To see a whole president?
President Wichi. Well, you compared the wealth and resources at the disposal of the CEO of Toyota and the president of Malawi. He saw a massive disparity. If Toyota were a country, it would be more than 300 times wealthier and richer than Malawi in terms of resources at the disposal of the guy on the top. So why should you meet him? He said, go and see my regional director in Johannesburg. Okay?
He snubbed him. My goodness. But I see your point.
But what's the point? Because the president of Malawi wanted to go and borrow, get a loan of some 100 Land Cruisers. Okay?
African priorities quite skewed. Wow.
You see, this happened many years ago. But Toyota, the CEO of Toyota and the resources he controls versus one country. You see, I'm talking about the market economy. I'm talking about the money market, the economic issues, because at the end of the day in life, everything comes down to economy.
It comes down to a number.
The economic issues. You see.
But isn't a panacea to that, a solution to that, the Africa Free Trade Continental Area?
Well, it is in place. The resolutions have been met, but it is not working as it should right now. We saw that in July 2016. We went to Kigali. I was there. We launched the African passport. But the African passport at the summit in July 2016 was given only to African heads of state who don't need this passport anyway. Where is the African passport for the 1.3 billion Africans? You and I should be able to move across Africa. In 2010, I traveled across 21 African countries. I became the first black African to traverse the African continent. 21 countries.
Well done.
Yeah. And I needed visas to 17 of the 21 countries. What nonsense is this, Africa? What nonsense is this? 50 years after independence, Africa still requires me to have a visa to 17 of 21 countries. And each visa would cost me $100, $200, $300. But the nonsense becomes more absurd when you realize that this damned white European or damned white American will need only 3 visas to do the same trip.
Not right.
So repatriation, when it's educational, it starts from self-emancipation. This doesn't need the European Union right now for Africa, through the African Union, to lift the requirement of visas for all Africans traveling in Africa.
That's powerful, Ambassador.
This is what Bob Marley is saying when you say the redemption song. You, the black man, who gotta redeem yourself first and foremost before you ask the white man to let you go.
Emancipate yourself from mental slavery.
Yes.
Indeed. So we have a long way to go.
This is the next liberation struggle.
And it must be fought.
Chimurenga chepfungwa izvi zvazvepfungwa izvi hazvizvepfuti izvi zvazvepfungwa nepenzura zvakungoda kuti tingoti AU African leadership and the whole collective African leadership, here is the pen, sign the document and free the black man to travel across Africa and do business with his brothers and sisters across Africa without the miracles of these so-called borders, visas, tariffs, you name it.
It's quite inconvenient. I think I tried to travel to Kenya. They also
It's not
changed
only inconvenient, it's self-sabotage.
Yeah.
It's self-sabotage. This is part of the repatriation process.
And repatriation is a must. Ambassador Kwame, I've got several messages coming in, and it would be remiss for me not to also bring our listeners into Chimurenga Chepfungwa chatiri kutaura panapa. This one is coming from Eunice, who says, interesting topic, and indeed, I agree that when a wrong is done, an apology and reparations have to be done. Now, may I ask His Excellency the Ambassador these questions? So she's got 3 questions for you. She said, should our stance be diplomatic or confrontational? I think reparations can still be done in cash and kind, but I'm worried how certain foreign leaderships will take it especially America, that is actually withdrawing aid at the moment. Then she says, yes, access and opportunities must be given to us Africans to do business easily and acquire education from our former colonizers. And then a little bit of levity, she says, Tino tumira zvishiri here kana varamba nema reparations.
Like I said, we may try diplomacy, but at the end of the day, must keep cognizant of the fact that we will have to get it and take it by any means necessary.
By any means necessary?
Yeah.
Okay.
It will have to be revolutionary. Now that America is leading in the cutting or abolition of so-called foreign aid, we've never got assistance or cash from Europe or America. It has never happened. That has been fiction. Now, someone said, I've just forgotten the name, but someone said, but I haven't forgotten the point they made. Someone said, foreign aid is the process of taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries.
That's actually quite accurate. That is accurate. Wow. We need to remember who that was. Ambassador, I will rush to the next question. Seguru Vataya says, good evening, Rumbi. Please ask the Leonard Ambassador, why is Africa the way it is at the moment? It's a poor continent, but it is rich in resources. He compares with other countries from other continents. He talks about China, and he says China was very poor 50 or so years ago. Now it's a superpower. Singapore, so I think he's mentioning the tiger economies. Talks about Israel, only formed in 1948, now one of the richest countries in the Middle East. Why is Africa not progressing? Where is the problem? How many years later after independence? And then I think one more. This one is an interesting one because Segru Babafe says it's not about which African people or nation makes better clay pots, which ones play the African drums with greater prowess. It's been said over and over again that Africa should unite. He talks about infiltration by greedy enemies, but then says the current African Union must be disbanded completely and a new body formed. What do you reckon?
Well, I'll start with the last one. The last point. That's it is better we improve the machine that we have, you see, by reforming the Constitutive Act of the African Union. The biggest letdown with the way the AU is structured is that, according to the Constitutive Act of the African Union, all decisions by the African Union Assembly, which is made up of the heads of state, are non-binding. This is the weakest and fatal point of the African Union. Saka tiri kuenda kuniti. Yeah, you see?
Yeah, no, I have nothing else to add because
we've got to make those decisions binding.
Absolutely.
So that when Canada decide, I will talk as a free trade. Canada decide by a majority, everyone has to follow and toe the line or else.
By any means necessary. The very last message, Ambassador, is from Kariga Mombe in Zimba, who says the conversation is great. However, we need to introspect as Africans, as a people. The ambassador is correct in demanding rights. We should not sound the wolf about colonization. Africa has been an enemy to these wars in Africa. Corruption is rife, economic meltdown, hunger, diseases. For all these, we as a people cannot blame the white man. And as long as we continue using their language as a mode of communication, let's forget about emancipation of Africa. In closing, and also taking that into cognizance, going forward beyond Africa Day, taking what is ours as Africans, achieving unity of purpose and demanding those reparations. Your closing submissions.
Well, the closing was already put in a song by Bob Marley, Redemption. And you know, when Bob Marley sang the Redemption song, he was actually paraphrasing a speech
By Marcus Garvey, yeah.
you see. So we've got this already. Let us understand that mental slavery is our biggest enemy right now. And some of the things that Africa is desperate for, it is in the hands of Africa to make the decision. Yeah, it is in the hands of Africa to make the decision. So we need to come to the point of decision. The decision to free ourselves. The decision to remove the barriers of communication between ourselves. There is no reason why there should be more tourism to Zimbabwe from the UK or Netherlands or Spain than from Mozambique. Our brother and sister, why is it that so? We've got to investigate this issue and correct it. So I said the whole thing about reparations and repatriation is a two-way street. We've got to fight the white man, Europe and America, and demand what is justly ours. But we also got to have a family meeting.
That's a good place for us to end our conversation, Ambassador Mzawazi. Part 2 is loading. Part 2 is loading.
The part 2 of the family meeting.
Of the family meeting is loading. Indeed. Thank you so much. It's always very enlightening to have these conversations with you. I know you've awoken something within our African selves. Some had hidden it away, but I suppose they can hear it knocking, and that family meeting is indeed necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Kwame Mzawazi, CEO of the Museum of African Liberation and the Institute of African Knowledge. Thank you so much, Ambassador Ashe, and have an African evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Now, with that, the time is just after 8. It's time for the news.
It's been quite a week on the premier current affairs show on radio, Deep Dive, on Capital 100.4 FM with Rumbi Zaivenge.
But the one thing that we cannot stop doing is conceptualizing, is thinking, is growing, and even sitting down and doing nothing is something. Somebody said that to me once.
The Deep Dive with Rumbi Zaivenge, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m. The premier current affairs show on radio.
Hi, this is Ringo Madlingozi. You are listening to Rumbi Benge on radio. Don't change the dial.
I'm Rosella Miller. You're listening to Rumbi Venge on Capitalk 100.4 FM, Harare's heartbeat.